What I see the call to for us at this time is for reimagination. And also in the word resilience, we're being called into the depths of ourselves to heal these wounds, to retrieve the deep soul gifts, and to bring them up to the surface and really weave together in this powerful way. To really sit in this grounded, open, vulnerable, transparent, non-defensive, committed, dedicated, courageous, more courageous than ever before, and keep our hearts open in the midst of everything that arises. That's what I feel is being called for.
Welcome, dear soul. Thank you for being here, co-creating a beautiful future. As we're here at this full moon and the start of a new month, there are many callings to stand more fully in the beauty of your own soul. This week, I hosted a yoga class on the theme of beautiful leadership, which I've gifted to all members of Presence and all our wonderful patrons. We appreciate your commitment to supporting us in bringing these conversations and resources to you. This month, the theme in Presence is Regenerative Futures, and when you join, you get the whole year's worth of workshops, resources, and will be welcomed into this heart-led community. And don't forget, if a specific episode over the past 4 years, or maybe a culmination of them, has influenced you and brought tangible shifts into your life, can you share the story with us? I know some stories that friends and patrons have shared and feel it would be so beautiful and powerful to hear a collage of these stories from our community for our community. If you have a story, then please make a voice note and send it to connect@thefutureisbeautiful.co by Thursday, the 1st of October. You can find the details of what to include on our newsletters and also on our social media. We are excited to be launching our leadership program this September, the Beautiful Leadership Immersion, which is open to anyone who wants to let go of a whole load of limiting beliefs, heal trauma, and bring your life deeper into your own soul radiance and purpose so that we can co-create a beautiful future. There is the Presence Leadership Mentoring, which has one-to-one support over the 3 months, or the Immersion, which is an online journey. It's not your standard online course, though. It is an experience which has lots of special guests and little missions to bring more beauty, wonder, joy, and soul connection into your life. When we started this project in 2010, I often said, we create the future by how we spend our time, money, and energy. And this immersion is really an opportunity to reassess all of this in a supportive and transformative community environment. There are 10 modules over the 13 weeks, rituals for well-being, presence meditation, so you can learn how to meditate if it's new for you, the beauty way, and then the 7 core modules, redefining leadership and worth, shadows, trauma and liberation, embodiment and biohacking, edge walking, vision and intuition, sacred activism and decolonization, creativity and flow consciousness, and finally, collaboration and community. I will be facilitating this program with a guest faculty made up of people that you will know from this podcast and some other friends that are perhaps new to you who will have something inspiring and powerful to offer. Enrollment is open now until we begin on the 14th of September, and I would love to share this journey with you, which will take us right up to almost the winter solstice and the end of the year. And with that, we will bring this empowerment and this transformation really into both our inner worlds and the way that we're showing up as we bring this year of 2020 to a close. For this week's conversation, we have a dear teacher and friend of mine, Sianna Sherman. I started studying with Sianna 6 years ago. I've been initiated into the work of the priestess with Sianna's guidance, as well as being on the first Rasa Yoga 300-hour program, where we gathered in Berlin. The community and friends that have come into my life through studying with Sianna are some of my most dear across the world, with this resonance of vision, embodiment, and celebration, with a deep care and commitment to the inner transformation. And I'm honored to be creating a series on sacred activism for the Rasa Yoga online training. I don't have exactly the words to explain what it is that I've learned from Sianna, or the ways in which she has supported me in stepping more fully into the gifts of my soul. But I know that as you hear her, you will get a sense of this incredible skill that she holds. One of the first things I learned from Sianna was the potency and beauty of my tears, which healed a lifetime of shame around this expression of emotion and healing, and was incredibly transformative for me. Sianna Sherman, who uses the pronouns she, her, is an international yoga teacher, training tens of thousands of students and teachers for nearly 3 decades. As a visionary of the Rasa Yoga Collective, Mythic Yoga Flow, and Ritual, Sianna shares her voice in the way of community and collaboration. She is a gifted storyteller and awakens the imagination through the language of the soul. Dedicated to embodied wisdom, social justice activism, anti-racism, unpacking her own white privilege, shadow work, mantra, ritual, and tantric yoga philosophy, Sianna brings a genuine presence to every offering with humility, devotion, and deep care for the collective. In addition, she has extensive training in bodywork, functional anatomy, wildcrafting, and earth-based wisdom. She leads Rasa Yoga teacher trainings, alchemical arts for sacred sisterhood, pilgrimages to sacred sites, and is the co-host of the Fearless Heart Activation series with her beloved Masood Ali Khan to inspire courageous conversations and brave space for real transformation in these times. When she is not teaching or dreaming up community activations, Sianna will most likely be somewhere outside in nature or cuddling up with her family. One thing that has always struck me when you hear Sianna's stories and you experience her embodiment and her presence, that it seems like she must be at least 3 times older than she is to have packed it all in. But it's really this beautiful expression of living with the fullness of life and presence. In this conversation called Weaving Our Soul Gifts into This Beautiful World, we explore the themes of reimagination, Rasa Yoga, and collective creativity as we contemplate the question, what legacy do we want to leave as ancestors of the future? I hope this episode moves you to a place of transformation, creativity, and courage. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to The Future is Beautiful, Sianna. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amisha. It's really a deep blessing to be here with you.
And of course, you were one of the people that I wanted to be part of the show when we began. And here we are. It's been 4 years later. So this interview, this conversation has been a long time coming. And of course, it's happening at the perfect moment.
Definitely.
So one of the things that I have always found really interesting around your story is the way that the political and the spiritual have woven together. And I remember you sharing stories of early days of activism with Monsanto, and then going very much like deeper into the spiritual aspects of yourself, and
And for me, Rasa Yoga feels very like integrated between where our inner experience and the way that we show up in the world, and then what that brings to the world and how that shapes the world kind of into play. And I would love to hear some of your story around that journey.
Thanks, Amisha. The power of deep spirit's always been alive inside of me from as far back as I can remember, and also really with my family, my mother, my father, sister, and then the elders and the grandparents. So really coming from a family that is very devoted and in deep prayer. As I was growing up, I had that strong influence always, and I tended to be quite inwardly mystical. At the same time, and in the way of the great paradox, I was also quite rebellious, had this kind of defiant spirit, let's say, at times, and I rebelled a lot against the status quo. And so my teenage years were filled with an extraordinary amount of rebellion and defiance, but at the same time, straddling a depth of like an inner journey and a deep prayer. And that pretty much, to sum that up, became a very intense 7 years from the age of 13 to 20 that I can very much say was one of the dark nights of the soul for me in my life. And I confronted a lot of pain in myself. What pulled me out of that was meditation and coming to yoga. And in the midst of that, I was in a narrowly focused track of becoming a medical doctor. So my whole dedication in the academic world was to become this doctor. And as I got to the doorway of medical school, something deeper inside of me, what I really refer to as the longing and the call of my soul, literally like tugged and pulled on me so hard, or pushed me in another direction, that I 100% had to follow this inner call. And so I left everything at that point and went into a big journey of the unknown. And it was at that point that everything began to open. And I started on the journey with yoga, and also traveling back to Ireland, which is where a lot of my family is from, to learn the ways of my ancestors from Ireland, which then led me into a lot of Celtic tradition and deep study in that way. And I ended up in mystery schools and traveling all through India and at ashrams, and, you know, as the story goes. But early on, during that kind of first big awakening at the end of my teens and the beginning of my 20s, also this rebellion in me turned itself towards to try to really understand ways that I could help in the world. And then one of the ways it turned towards was towards food, because in that dark night of the soul in my teen years, I had a great many food disorders. I also grew up a lot on fast food and sugar, and had a very weak immune system. And so I turned towards organic food. When I learned about it, I didn't even know that was a thing until I was about 20. When I first saw I was at this festival in Chicago, and it said organic festival. I thought it meant organic chemistry, because I was trained more in the way of science. And I was like, oh, okay. But then my whole world opened up. And that's then when I started to learn about Monsanto and what was actually happening in the food industry, and with the factory farming of animals and all of this. And then my spirit just like rocked it at that point. And all I wanted to do was to help create real change on the planet. And then that marriage then started in my own deep personal journey, and then coming to shadow work, and then the mystery school, and then all the yoga, and then the political activism. And it just kept going from that point. And I never turned back. It has shape shifted through the years, most definitely. But my whole being started to move in accordance with my soul, and then really looking out into the world and saying, how can I actually be part of real change?
Beautiful. And it feels like that shape shifting is about being present to how things are moving, and allowing yourself and your worldview to keep opening and keep deepening.
It's been a radical journey of opening and growing and learning and unlearning and unpacking and unraveling and all of it. It's a very humble and radical journey. It is about the alchemy of the soul and the depth of my being that really is here to grow, and to grow in deep shared humanity, like in a certain kind of way. It's continually becoming more deeply human and present to the depth of our shared humanity.
Beautiful. You mentioned earlier your time in Ireland, and as soon as you said that, my heart lit up with one of the stories that you've shared about that time. I just feel our friends listening would love to hear about your meeting with John O'Donoghue.
Oh, John O'Donoghue. Yes, that was a great meeting. Part of my family is from Galway. When I first left the academic world at 20, the first place I wanted to go was to Ireland. And so that then began these journeys to Ireland, and I went often. On one of the occasions, I had made a pilgrimage to Kildare, Ireland, which is known as the Church of the Oak. And in the way of the Druids, the oak groves are sacred. And this is where many of the ceremonies and the deep teachings and initiations will occur. The saint known as Saint Bridget, also known as the goddess Brida, she goddess and saint, her home is in Kildare. So I was going to Kildare, and there's an amazing festival that happens there at Bridget's feast time, so to speak, of Imbolc, or Candlemas, you might know it as, and it's in late January, early February, and it's healers and visionaries and artists and political activists, and everyone shows up, and you're in this deepest celebration of Bridget and of the power of humanity in all these ways of creativity, of activism, of growth, of healing. And so I would go to this festival. Well, on one of them in the mid-90s, I had been with a group of pagans with a hand fasting ceremony through the night. We were all painted in blue and drumming through the night and singing and all of this. And it was on a Saturday night. And then very early on Sunday morning, I looked up and I saw all these people coming down, walking down the pathway, the road, and they were dressed very differently than we were. And I thought, oh my gosh, we better pack up and go. This man walked up to me, and he had these big liquid brown eyes that would just melt you in the moment that you met his gaze. And he said, won't you please stay for Sunday morning mass with us? And I looked at him and I said, oh, thanks for asking, but I don't do that anymore. I left the Catholic Church years ago, actually when I was 13 years old, which, was part of my great rebellion. And he looked at me and he said, I want to really encourage you to stay. This might be a little different. And so then I stayed, and we were at the wellspring of Bridget, and outside, the mass was held outside, and it was John O'Donoghue, of course. And he then, as he went on to be the ceremonialist of this great ritual, it came to the time of the communion and of drinking the wine and of the time of offering peace. And when it came to the moment of peace, he looked out to us and he said, before you shake someone's hand in the way of peace, please go out into nature right here. Just take a moment with yourself and please make peace with yourself in some way. And then when it came to the moment of the wine and the sacraments, he said, I want to ask you, what is it that your soul is really thirsty for? And then when it was the moment of the sacrament of the communion, what is it in the depth of your being that you're really deeply hungry for? Then the whole thing, I mean, I have chills like in this moment. And then afterwards, he invited me to the pub and he shared stories with me. And we danced the Irish dances and we spent the whole day together. And he became one of my greatest teachers, of course. And the truth is that it was through John O'Donohue that became the bridge for me of healing, of the inner essence of Christianity, which I had very much walked away from at this point because of the institution of the church, which is what I was in rebellion against. And yet there's some part of me that was drawn to it. And it was at odds with my love of the earth-based understanding and wisdom, as well as of the practices of yoga. And so I was actually in a big degree of conflict and being kind of shredded and torn apart. But then through my meeting with John O'Donohue and my subsequent studies and going deeper in the currents with him, all of that healed and it bridged. And then it actually created a tapestry, a woven tapestry that became part of my own embodied understanding and wisdom.
Through that has become part of mine and many of our sisters and brothers that we've shared practices with, thanks to what you've brought into the world.
Thank you, Amisha.
Of course. How important is it for somebody that is on their spiritual path to heal that lineage? Because often people find an easier connection with something that's new. And so we're in this time where, where there's a lot of talk about how like white the yoga world is now, like the modern yoga world and plant medicines, and that there's that kind of reaching for the ancient wisdom of different cultures. And I just wondered like how, for some, I understand that happens because it's without the stories and where the harm has been done, and so you're able to access something new in a freer way and receive the teachings. But is it important to also, heal your own lineage and understand like the religious influences of your own ancestry?
So beautiful, Amisha. It's something that's really deep and close to my heart, that we are bearing witness right now in a big way where it's being revealed how much cultural appropriation has been happening, how much whitewashing has been happening, and the colonization. And, for those of us who are white identity and with white privilege, that we have to really decolonize our own mindset and do this in the way of what I really feel is in the way of showing up with real mutual responsibility and for the collective care, because it is just so easy to want to run out and take and assimilate from somewhere else and not work out our own stuff. And we can see this in multiple ways inside the whole psyche of our being. I really rejected my roots in that way of what I was born into through the Catholicism. I found it incredibly problematic on many levels, but that was at the level of what was happening in the institution. Once I started to understand this and I went deeper into the actual essence of the gnosis and of the living essence and wisdom of Christianity, that's where I fell in like wildly, passionately in love. In a certain way, it is why my first journey when I started to travel and leave the United States on a fairly regular basis, the first place I wanted to go to was to Ireland, because I knew that I had roots there, and I physically went to try to find the land and the homes and the deepest inner spirit, of these people. And that opened up so much. I would say, here's what I want to say on one level. As you know, I'm a deep lover of shadow tracking and shadow dancing and shadow work. What lives in the shadow is anything that we reject, cast out, push away, and deny about our own selves. This can happen in our own inner spirituality and in our ancestry too. So if there's something that we don't like, then we push it away, we bury it, and we keep rejecting it. And then we reach out and look for the next kind of shiny object or something that's novel to us or something that catches our attention, and keep going for that while we're pushing away and burying deeper in the shadow what we've even been born into. And so in a certain way, and this is one of the ways I might invite us into this, is to turn towards whatever it is that we are really pushing down and rejecting and denying about our own selves and our own lives. Turn to that and begin in the way of embrace and say, okay, I don't understand this. I want, and we just start naming things. I don't understand this. I don't understand what I was born into. I don't want to understand it. I want to run away. It causes me pain. It pisses me off. We just start naming all the things that arise for us. But by turning to it and turning towards that pain and that rejection in the way of embrace, there's already an alchemical transmutation that begins to happen. Then we're invited in really within our own deep spirit to be in dialogue with the inner essence of what this is. And so much will actually be revealed to us and will be healed. This kind of turning towards is not only healing for ourselves, but it is for our families and for our lineages and for our ancestry and for the future generations as well. There's a lot more I could say, but I think that this is a nice offering in this particular moment. And our soul does resonate multi-dimensionally. I am a deep, deep devotee of the tantric tradition in yoga and of the goddess, and especially in her forms as the Dasha Mahavidya and the fierce wisdom goddesses. And I cannot deny that either. So there can be like a both and that when it is not the culture into which I was born, then this is like extra humility and really going the distance to deeply respect and deeply honor and make sure that I honor these origins and I pay it back and I amplify these voices, and I don't just take from it, make money from it, profit from it, and then, reject all those origins and push that deeper into the shadows and into the lands of profiting, the profiteer over the actual respect. And that's really the big harm. One of the big harms of appropriation. There's so many more, but the respect of where things are coming from and to due diligence, like to show up really deeply in this learning and in giving credit and in amplifying the voices and the lifting of these traditions.
Yeah, so we can fully respect the bodies that we are in and the stories and the families and the ancestry and the place that we have been born into. Also honor where our soul moves us towards, and those teachings that are so familiar and resonant with our soul, and different people gravitate towards different teachings. They can have that just way of being like, I know this.
And Tantra, and you mentioned the word weaving, and that this podcast is in service of a weaving as well. Tantra, one of its metaphorical understandings is that which is a great woven tapestry. And of course, we have this sacred thread of our being and the sacred threads that are weaving a tapestry in our being. And then we're co-weaving with each other and with spirit. And I feel deeply that what we're being asked more than ever is to truly honor each other and to non-defensively be in very challenging conversations when there is pain and harm that happens and that is made known to us. Then what we are being asked is to truly be humble and non-defensive, and to listen and say, I am sorry. How can I do better? And take it upon ourselves then to actually find all the ways that we can study and learn and do better, and to not cause this harm. That this also then means it is just to be so humble, to follow deeply our inner longing, and to show up with real humility. And again, I want to return that in a certain way, the more that I'm alive, I feel that my quest in a certain way is just to be as deeply, compassionately, empathically human as possible. And to keep showing up in this way and seeing how can I grow and how can we grow together and how can we be part of a true great change with positive impact. And I was, of course, your podcast, This Beautiful Future. I was with a great activist many years ago. Her name is Julia Butterfly Hill, and she's very famous for living in the redwood tree Luna for 2 years and really fighting for these trees. So I was with her at an event, and one of the things she said was, she looked out and she said, we are all ancestors of the future. So what is the legacy that we will choose to leave? Because we are all ancestors of the future. And I like that just like struck me like a lightning bolt inside of me. And it was one of those defining moments in our lives where this lightning bolt struck through the center of me. And I just felt everything resonate with that. Yes. And I began to ask myself, to see myself, yes, I am an ancestor of the future. I might be in my 20s, and I wouldn't think of myself like that, but that is true. I will leave a legacy of some kind. What do I want that to be? And of course, there's a great mystery involved in that, but I also can consciously dial my compass, so to speak, for this beautiful future and for these future generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we remember our worth. We remember that we are here and we are alive, and what we do and the way that we show up, even just the way that we think and the way that we see the world, is shaping it. It's making a difference. And that through all of these amazing practices and tools that we have, we can come into a closer resonance with our soul in the way that we choose to do this, and also enjoy the ride of being human and the never-ending transformation. When you and I met and I started to come to your offerings, that was one of the things that was very profound for me, that I hadn't come across teachers that held themselves and at the same time were happy to share really about an ongoing process and all of those emotions, and how you don't get to a place where everything is amazing all the time. And I know we know this, but this came up in a call that I was hosting for the Presence community, which is part of this community. When the melancholy comes, or the frustration, or the anger, or we're in those spaces of where there's a lot of responsibility and it feels aligned, but we're not living our best lives, that it can sometimes be easy to forget that is all part of it, and it's beautiful aspects of it, and we actually wouldn't want all of that to go away in a permanent state. And so being in that place where we're constantly open to transform, and then with that allowing the collective space to forever be transforming as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Amisha. Yeah, I love your voice and the way that you are bringing all this through. One of the things that, as you were speaking, that I was feeling is the gift of creativity and creative energy. And I know that you're very much in service to this. And that the thing is if we look even to our wounds and we do not attend to them, And so we just let the wounds keep going through our lives and bring no focus and light of awareness there, and no relationship with this part of ourselves. There's a lot of trapped energy that gets taken up inside of us, a lot of space, internal space, it gets taken up inside of us, and this trapped energy and getting tangled up in knots. And then when life happens, as it does, and in all these ways that we least expect, then we get pushed and react and get triggered and move from our reactivity. And sometimes from being fused with the wounds of our own inner child, and we're reacting to the world from that place, or becoming, highly aggressive and reacting from that place. All sorts of things can happen. But the truth is that this is actually all energy. And the moment that we turn towards our own wounds in the way of this embrace, for there to be the transformation that you're speaking about, what begins to happen is a release and a freedom and a liberation of this energy that then is our own creative power. And also that the wounds begin to reveal the inner genius of the self and the inner gifts of the self, the magic of the self, the medicine of the self, however you want to phrase that and work with it. And then that liberation of our voices and our gifts and our medicine and our genius and the magic of who we are, hooked up with others in real sense of collective care and mutual responsibility, then now the world goes. And it is an enormous celebration. And the thing is that it's why I often refer to shadow work, is I like to think of it as shadow dancing. We hear that shadow work and we go, ooh, that sounds really scary and it'll be so, intense. And it is, all those things, but it's a huge celebration. And it is this amazing dance of our lives. And to be gifted with a human life, with life of any form, this is the miracle. This is to bow down to the gift of life and the miracle of life every single day, and to truly celebrate it, and to go the distance, and to do better, and to do the work. All of it gets to be here together.
And with that, I love that you brought in the miracle of this life. And this year in particular, there's been a lot of this year's crazy, and how this is happening, and now this is happening, and now this is happening, and I've got to work on this and this, and a lot of people have felt like that in a washing machine. I have felt the calmest I've ever felt in 2020. It's I'm often one for having the opposite experience of the majority. That's been one of my special skills in this life, to be
one of your many specialties.
Yeah, to be just the one that's crying when everyone's dancing, and the one that's dancing when everyone's crying. I'm that is the way that it's unfolded. But for those that are really questioning purpose and questioning our capacity to be resilient and show up through everything that's being revealed, and through systems that we have been comfortable and accustomed to, through these breaking down. And for a lot of people, just really to honor that this has been a year of immense pain and difficulty and loneliness, or kind of feeling trapped, and also overwhelm at how much there is to do, how much there is to change. And yeah, how do you feel about the invitation of this time that we are in?
Thank you. Well, I want to begin by honoring really the deep pain and the grief and the loss and the confusion, the anxiety, the overwhelm, and the unknown. I want to really begin by honoring all of this that is part of the inner landscape and the outer landscape that is being traversed right now in perhaps, greater degrees than many people have known perhaps in this particular lifetime. So I like to begin by honoring all of this. One of the first words that you said as you began to speak is resilience. And the truth is that it's in times of immense adversity, and it's at times when we're at the transformative growth edge where embodied resilience is actually born. And we are in the midst of a huge metamorphosis inwardly, individually, collectively, psychically, in the actual way that the world operates. Like all of it is undergoing a massive renovation like we've never seen before. Part of metamorphosis, of course, is that caterpillar body in the chrysalis undergoes a complete meltdown. It's a soupy mess inside of that. That's bottom. It is just a soupy mess, and no one can make sense out of anything because it's just like a big dissolved mess. That inside of that dissolution and that soupy mess, and it's from my understanding that the last thing that gets dissolved in the caterpillar's body is actually the head. And it's highly symbolic of it's our own conditioning and the limitations of the ego that are kind of the last to dissolve and get really surrendered in these moments. But inside of that, the imaginal cells are born. And so, of course, the butterfly wings and the antenna and all the things that we love about butterflies, but it's those cells that never existed before with a new imagination that are being born in the moment. And what I see the call to for us at this time is for reimagination. And also in the word resilience, so I think of embodied resilience and reimagination at this time. And resilience, we often, if we look at the word, it's like to take back its original form, so to speak. But there's also an inherent understanding of this bounceability of like bouncing back, that we're at a time where we're not actually going to bounce back to what was. And in fact, we don't even, in truth, if we really examine it, we don't even want to, because what that was something that was causing harm on a lot of levels to a lot of people. So now resiliency is like, how are we going to spring back and move forward? This salient moment where we have the capacity to reimagine our world. And then we look to the things, that are right in front of us and also in our communities and in the world. And we ask, where can we show up? So like an example that my partner, Masood, has a 10-year-old boy. So I'm very much invested in helping to reimagine education right now, in the spirit of education, and becoming more involved. They're all online at this moment, but I'm writing questions into the new principal and, asking like, how is the school going to help these children educate about racism, and what's the intention of the school? How are they going to interface with this? And, bringing these things through, because I want to help and be part of reimagining the education. How are the schools going to attend to helping these kids who perhaps don't learn by the rote memory methodology and they aren't thriving in the school systems? How can we reimagine the education that allows people to thrive, et cetera? And there's many other ways that I want to be part and am part of reimagination, but I want to invite us to reimagining the world. Of course, I'm highly and deeply involved in the yoga industry, and I feel like this whole yoga industry is now at a point where we can go, let's dismantle what obviously hasn't been working, what has been whitewashed, what has been taken over by the dominant culture, what has left out, all the voices that should have been celebrated and uplifted from the beginning. And let's dismantle what we need to dismantle and reimagine now a new possibility. And that it is this, that in the times of our deepest pain and the deepest confusion, it are actually the moments of imaginal selves that are like, what about this, opportunity? What about this new vision? There is something more that is calling to us, something more that is longing to be born at this time. And this is a great passion of mine, to reimagine and to build our resiliency and to show up in this way.
And can you share a little bit about how you're doing that with Rasa Yoga? And so this school has been a long time dream, but born into form quite recently. And then now we're in this time where gathering physically isn't possible in the way that it always has been. And also in this space of wanting to honor different voices and change the business model and all of this kind of stuff. And I know it's like it's still all moving and evolving as it always will. But can you share a little bit about how you're reimagining?
Again, Rasa Yoga as a school and a collective. I mean, we very consciously chose collective a couple years ago when the school was first coming, through the ethers and through the dreams and through the requests. I often spoke of the collective heart tribe. It was some of the phrasing that I used. And then about 5 years ago or so, I started to feel like, well, maybe this using the word tribe isn't really the word I want to use, because that can cause harm too, for tribal people. And so I started to release that. Then I thought, well, it's the power of the collective. And I also have a mentor that I want to name, who's just been a primary mentor for me these last few years. In particular, her name's Michelle Cassandra Johnson, and she's really my mentor and guide, primary mentor and guide with dismantling racism. She wrote the book Yoga is Skill in Action. So her book, Skill in Action, it's the intersection of yoga and social justice. And it's amazing. And I hope everyone will read this and study it. So I said to Michelle, I said, I'm really feeling like the word tribe is not what I'm meaning. It's more about the collective, and that there's a paradigm shifting that can happen when we first honor each other, see each other, and allow ourselves to be seen by each other. There's no kind of hierarchical, like one person at the top who has all the answers, but that we need the many voices in all of us, working together to bring change. And so she was part of this conversation with me. And then I made the choice, along with Greta Hill and with the teacher trainers, let's shift this to the Rasa Yoga Collective. So it is all of us together, and that we can be part of paradigm shifting. And so now there are 9 teacher trainers other than me, and every single teacher trainer is fully committed to anti-racism education and study and activism in their own lives. We're all showing up for the really important conversation of what is cultural appropriation. How are we part of it? How can we dismantle it? How can we really turn to true honoring and to decolonize the mindset? And so all of these aspects of the social justice flame are of the essence for the Rasa Yoga Collective. And so then also to amplify the voices of the South Asian teachers and the keepers, the wisdom keepers of this tradition, and to really turn to their teachings and understanding and voices as how we're learning and growing together. And so these are some of the ways in which we're showing up as deep as we can, and to keep doing better, and also honoring the voices, and to very deeply honor the tradition, the roots, and the lineage. And I would say that as all the really tough conversations peak, that we don't turn away from them, but that we lean in, and we lean into what's uncomfortable, so that we can actually stand for true liberation for all.
It's been really wonderful, and just some really great sessions that you've been hosting with the Fearless Heart activations, and bringing in so many different teachers and musicians, and to share their wisdom and to widen that platform.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we have Masood and I, my beloved. We've been hosting. That started with a dream. I it's so interesting. My last big travel before the quarantine was that I was in India, and then I had a dream, like a profound longing to go to Kamakya in Assam, India for the last 2 decades. And I finally made that pilgrimage, and with a group of women, of deep, really deep sisters.
I was so nearly there. And then
we felt you.
My father, because I had to be with my father, and I was dreaming like there with you all.
Amisha and I like totally felt you, and we're calling you in 100%. So I was with this beautiful group of women, and we were in really just like the deepest transmission in Kamakya, and with the wisdom goddesses of the Shakta Tantra tradition. And then I flew back to the States, and then literally like 3 hours later, the borders closed and I was here. Then I underwent a series of really profound dreams that were with mantras and all sorts of teachings from those inner depths of being. And one of the things that I was told, specific mantras to be chanting during this time and to prepare for what was coming, and who knew, like, everything that was about to unleash. But then in that first week, I had this dream spirit come and say, initiate the fearless heart activations, and begin hosting it. I was told exactly what to do, instructed completely. And so we began that then in the first week of April. Then it opened up into this exquisite hosting, and we got to host you, which was amazing, and all these profound voices, and to host the voices of Black artists and teachers and visionaries, and bring their voices and talents and offerings all the way through. And then in the yoga tradition of so many of the Indian teachers and voices, and then to really turn towards cultural appropriation and turn towards what ways can we show up in the way of dismantling racism and decolonization. And the conversations have been deep and profound and awakening and amazing.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members, and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation.
When and how did you really learn to listen and trust your intuition in the way that you do? Was that something that you had to learn and kind of reclaim in this life? Or was that something that you always had a strong relationship with?
I love it. I've never thought to ask myself that. And I love it. My sense is that I had very strong intuition as a child, which I have a feeling that most of us do. And, if left to our own freedom and ways of discovering that, we're following that. And then, because in my particular life experience, I turned pretty intensely to academics as a way of, I would say, validating myself. I discovered early on that I had the type of capacity to do well in the academic setting, and that when I performed well through academics, that the world very much validated me, and it became a false source of my own self-esteem and worthiness. So, but I received so much praise and validation for this, especially through my family and through the school systems. As the more that I let myself identify with that, I would say that's when there was the break and the loss of following my own intuition, because I was in a certain way pushing against my own intuition in order to receive this academic accolades in my life that was becoming my identity. Then as the internal breakdown happened from the age of 13 on, and it was pretty big internal breakdown, that as that happened, and then I made that choice at the age of 20, okay, I'm leaving all this because I'm utterly unhappy. Then it was at that moment, that was, I talk about it as my soul guiding me from the depths within, but we could speak of it as my intuition too, knowing that there was something so much greater for me in my life. Now, the moment that I said yes in that way, my intuitive powers just blasted open again. And so much of my life was guided in this way. In my very early 20s, I studied astrology quite in depth, but my teacher was also deep with Jungian analyst background. And he was the one who first initiated me into shadow work. As I turned towards the shadow work, then more and more of the false identification of myself and the barriers I'd put around my own intuition and my own heart started to break down. And I was more free from within to listen and trust. And it was a practice as well. Like I had to keep showing up for the practice and cultivation of this.
Thank you. As I've been writing this intuition book during this time, and it's just been just that question of like, with the cultural conditioning against our intuition being so strong, that it's such a thing, and especially with the history of witch hunts and everything else that and colonization that this world's built on, that really stepping into the power of our intuition, the fullness of our being, that inner guidance and allowing our souls to illuminate our lives and the path, rather than these false identities and these false notions of success and progress that we've all been indoctrinated in. And I just find that question so interesting around like how different people have made that step, and because I feel like if more people would take that call at this time, it would really have such an impact in the way that the collective is able to shift, if we're able to come into that really deep relationship with all that inner wisdom.
Yes. And one of the things that so much supported me in this as well is that when I made these big life changes, one of the first things I did in a certain way was return to the earth and return to nature, because all of my, highly focused time inside the books, I was not outside in nature very much. And when I released needing to prove myself in that way at that particular time in my life, all of a sudden I had a whole bunch more time on my hands. And I ended up going into the woods a lot and with the trees. And I remembered like my primary connection in nature as a young girl was with the trees. I was always a lover of the trees. And then of course, when I started going to Ireland and studying more of the traditions and then understanding the language of the trees. And I felt like that language had been speaking to me my whole life, but I just had closed myself down to it for a while. And so as I returned to being in the forest and with the earth and sleeping outside many, many nights and years underneath the different phases of the moon and coming back into rhythm with nature and then studying the wheel of the year and understanding that these phases and these seasons and these cycles are so beautiful and inherent in all of nature and inherent inside of me, it plugged me back in and so profoundly. And then my intuition also just became that much more clear to me through all. I love being in nature, bottom line. And I'm so glad that I was able to reawaken myself to the great love of the earth. And then I started growing all my own food and chopping my own firewood. And I, did the whole thing and moved off the grid and all the stuff, worked on organic farms. I had to re-educate myself in a new way because all of that had been forgotten. My mom's mom and my father's, both sets of grandparents, all knew the value of the earth and the land and the earth. And as farmers and as my grandmothers in particular, medicine women with the plants and with the herbs. And that would become something that then I would also reclaim in my early 20s. And I became a medicine maker and studied with the elders and the folkloric healers and learned how to make medicines of the earth and work in this way. So it was a coming into deep connection with the earth and with nature, which is one of my primary passions, is also what gave birth to being able to follow my intuition. And there's just one thing that you said like the revelation, I'm paraphrasing, but of that we're inside patriarchy and we're just, pushing along through that. And I often speak of the heroine's journey. The hero's journey is so well known, but the heroine's journey is less spoken about. And in the heroine's journey, it begins with a disconnect from the mother and an over-identification with the father. And you can take this in all sorts of levels, but that then the person becomes the father's daughter. And we could say the daughter of patriarchy or the child, the child of patriarchy, and then pushing in this patriarchal way to prove ourselves. And then there's a certain kind of false or illusory success. So success might happen in certain ways, but the soul is dry and desiccated. And then the soul starts, calling out. And at this point, there's an understanding that something is missing. And then the descent happens. And so in the heroine's journey, there's a big descent into the underworld in order to meet that which has been repressed, denied, rejected, and left unattended to. And it's this meeting in the underworld, like Inanna, the queen of heaven to the earth, descending to meet her sister self, the queen of death and the queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal, until Inanna makes that descent and really meets the whole of herself. She cannot really have a true integrated power in the world. And so this process of each of us then is descending into the depths of the being of the soul so that we can reemerge and rise and then begin to really integrate ourselves and then serve from this integration of self rather than just trying to grab and profit and reach for a false identification and from the wounds of the self. And then the world just becomes increasingly problematic. So we're being called into the depths of ourself to heal these wounds, to retrieve the deep soul gifts, and to bring them up to the surface and really weave together in this powerful way.
I was thinking about an aspect of this today as I was out and about, as my father left his body 2 months ago, and I was just feeling into like, what is the deep invitation of being a woman who doesn't have a living father? And so with that, like, what is the opportunity to reimagine this, the sense of the masculine and my place within patriarchy? And yeah, it feels like a really beautiful invitation to really honor that this transition has happened. I'm spending a huge amount of time with my mother at the moment, and feeling into that, like, oh, what is it to be women that don't have a man in embodied form in a position of authority in our lives? And yeah, just taking that initiation to live with greater liberation, and to also feel very much his soul essence supporting that liberation, and what that will bring for the future generations as well as they move through me. And yeah, not being afraid of really showing up when these transitions appear.
Yes. Oh, your beautiful father. So blessings, blessings, blessings. I feel that too. My dad is going to be 90 years old this year in just about 6 weeks. Last night and early this morning, I was really just like sending like songs and prayers and blessings to him. And I'm going to be able to be with him. That is one of the great gifts for me this year, is because I'm not on the road all the time. I'm actually going to physically be with my mother for her 86th birthday and my father for his 90th, and to honor these great elders and my parents. And, you know, and then as their time comes and they travel into the other realms, the gifts of what they've given live inside of us. And then each of us, of course, the inner sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine, the great Heros Gamos, and that dance of all of it within us, that then again, we're the ancestors of the future. So then we become that legacy, keeps on moving and flowing in these ways.
Absolutely. As you were sharing the reminder that normally you've been moving a lot in your life and have been nurturing communities around the world, I wondered if you can share like how you have been able to do that with the presence that you offer. And I asked that question from, I guess, like a perspective of like, one of the things that I hear sometimes from students and clients and friends is that, oh, well, like when I'm settled, I'll like do those practices, or like I'll be able to do that, like, or when things are really busy at the moment, when things calm down, like I'll do that. One of the things that I have observed with you is the level of devotion to all of your practices, and the way that doesn't change when there's flights or there's new places. Maybe that's the answer to the question, but maybe there's more.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, this is the first time in 25 years, and maybe a little more, that I haven't pretty much been living on the road. I get asked this question a lot, actually. My own practices are the sustaining force and my inner devotion, really. But one of the key sustaining factors for me is that I genuinely love people and relationships and community. I have just like loved the sense and power of community ever since I can remember. And I am in service to this. And so as I've traveled, it's just been such an enormous honor to be able to serve in these constellations of great souls who find each other in this place, in this place, in this place. And for me, it's such a deep honor to be able to serve in this way. And it is my love and my passion for community and for people being together in a way that we grow together and we learn together and we practice together and we celebrate life together, and that new things are born through all of us being together. It's so celebratory for me, in a certain way. And it's such a passion for me that's what would move me across all these time zones and, packing the bags from here to there and being on the road 80-90% of every year. It was the passion and the love and my value, one of my core values is real relationship and the power of community and serving that. So that's what's kept me going. And I won't deny it. It's definitely tricky a lot of times. I think that I was living in a perpetual state of jet lag from all these wild time zones, yet somehow was sustained from within. And I will say this year has been a total gift in the way that I don't know that anything, what else could have pulled me, to not be on the road to that degree. And now I'm in a whole new rhythm. I go to bed every night around the same time. I wake up around the same time. I can feel that there is a pranic kind of force that is growing in me just from having the actual presence of stability within one place over a sustained period of time, that this is a tremendous gift that is being born within me as well.
And I remember you sharing with me in November that it was your intention to find ways to be home more. And
yes, and here
they
it is.
Found you.
I am a guardian and a mentor and a guide for this beautiful 10-year-old who lives with us much of the time. And life goes quick, as we know. And I was really in recognition of this. I do not want to miss this child's life. And I want to be part of it. And I want to be in service to this. And I want to be with my family too. So this is a great boon for me.
As we're talking about community and just the importance of collaboration and nurturing and holding space for each other and for each other's gifts, really, to rise to the surface. And this is something that I know you've been doing for a long time, but for some, they are just waking up out of the paradigm of competition and needing to keep everything for themselves. And if I lift you up, then I go down, and these ways of thinking. And I wondered what you could offer in the way of the power of collaboration, the willingness to see people.
Well, this is another great passion of mine, is collaboration, as you know. Some of the most joyful, ecstatic experiences of my life have been to be in collaboration with others. There's this beautiful word in Sanskrit, Shri, and Shri means the radiance, that which is auspicious. It's a term that you could place before a name for just that total affection and honoring and praise. And then it's also a name of the goddess, form as Lakshmi, she who is the ever abundant and generative force of abundance, and that generous prosperity of the heart that just naturally, of its own essence and accord, wants to share, wants to collaborate, wants to, thrive with, not over. And so one of her names is Shri. And the inherent meaning and invitation of Shri is that together, it's really in the togetherness that prosperity opens up, and that this is not a zero-sum game, even though the conditioning and the institutions and the systems will like it to be that way for power over. But the real essence is one of a generative power of the heart, that when we anchor here and we connect in that heart space and with each other, and we see each other and we allow ourselves to be seen by the other, and we move out of the way in order for someone else's voice to step forward. And especially now, like understanding the privilege that I have. So the white privilege, let's say, to even go there, but there's many other forms of privilege that I have, and that proximity to power that I have by these social locations, that this is the time more than ever to actually step aside and bring the marginalized voices in and up. And so that is the real power of prosperity, and for me, what Shri really means. And my inner practices, my inner devotion is, I have a deeply goddess-based kind of inner world and practice. And so Shri is of the essence. And so this is just so important to me. And I think especially now that the power of collaboration more than ever is needed. And there's this, I'm trying to remember, there's this great activist, she's an elder from Australia, and she said something like this, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because you've recognized that your liberation is bound with mine, well, now let's get to it. Let's work together. That's really, for me, what the power of collaboration is. It's not about like the problematic and the harmful is when we think that one voice is going to have all the answers and to lead the way and to know everything and to pedestal that, to that power differential just creates havoc. And the power of collaboration is like, no, we all have value. We all have gifts. We all have something to be heard and seen. Some of us have been highly privileged that our voices have been received and more upheld and pedestaled. Now it's time for us to look and all around us and behind us and say, wait a minute, whose voice didn't get to be heard? And now what can I do to serve that and to create a greater force field of collaboration and to bring these voices through? And so for me, that's the power of Shri.
We are offering a new journey called the Beautiful Leadership Immersion. And I wondered if you could share what beautiful leadership means to you.
Well, Amisha, the first is that I'd like to just honor you for your beautiful leadership and for following your heart and for putting the time and the effort in to write your book on intuition, to bring these platforms together, to have the podcast and to look of how we can create a beautiful future. The power of beautiful leadership is the power of sight to open and to see what hasn't been seen and how we can shape together a new way where everyone does get to receive the benefits and everyone is uplifted and that everyone can thrive. And that will require a tremendous amount of courage for every person who will become part of this new leadership, and that the leadership, again, will not be just a one voice, but it will be the many, inclusive and diverse and together, and a collective leadership as a beautiful leadership, and one that is of accountability that we hold inside ourselves, but then also accountability with each other. I think it's more important than ever before that for anyone in positions of leadership to have accountability partners, and to actually say, like, I want you to call me out, call me in, see what I can't see, and together we grow. That this will be part of it as well.
Thank you for that. And bringing back in the dance with the shadow and how we can dance together. I wondered if you can share a little bit on, this is a big question, but a lot of our friends listening and maybe not so into yoga and see yoga as a leggings and movement practice. Yeah. I would love for you to just blow that open into what yoga really is?
The root of the word yoga is yuj in Sanskrit, and it means to yoke and to connect. The power of yoga is to connect us with the whole of our being. This means in mind, in body, in spirit, in heart, and the power to be in real, true, authentic relationship with ourselves and with each other. If we think about our lives, and what's most important to us, whoever we are, that one of the central themes and core values that will come up over and over is the deep value of our relationships, and to be able to be in relationships with our families, our children, our lovers, our friends, our community, all the different types of relationships that we're in, to be in our relationships in a way that feels like that we're really happy in our relationships, that we can communicate in our relationships, that we can celebrate our relationships, that when tough stuff comes up in our relationships, that we know how to be with that. One time I was asked, what is advanced yoga? In that moment, I said, for me, the most advanced yoga is to be able to keep our hearts open in the midst of conflict. How do we do that? Because if we can keep our hearts open in the midst of conflict, and when things are going all backwards and inside out in all the ways we never saw coming, but we can keep our hearts open and present to that, then what actually comes after that blows our minds. We have gone deeper and more intimate with life and with each other. Yoga is and it's what I started with, is becoming more deeply human. And it is to strengthen our vessel, to be able to get out of our own way so that spirit can move through us. We can hear from within what's true to our hearts and how we want to move and live and breathe and bring who we are and bring our creative energy into this world. And then to also be of service, to the greater whole. Yoga is this for me entirely. And there are many practices of yoga. Some of them are the ones that have been featured in the West as asana, but that is just a little tiny small aspect of what yoga is. Yoga is the celebration of the whole of our lives, and to be able to have real intimacy with the whole of our being. And in this way, creative energy opens up within us. Our mind gets more clear. We can make decisions with greater clarity. We go deeper in our relationships. We celebrate life more fully. We are able to show up and do the work and do better when that is being asked of us and called forth. And in the times of conflict and adversity, we can actually have a new kind of strength and resilience that is born, and the kind of softening and humility too that is required to show up so that together we can create a better world.
Beautiful. Thank you. And for our last question, I want to go back to where we began, which was around spirituality and politics. And in this reimagining and co-creating of a beautiful future that many of us are called to do, we also find ourselves in cultures of multiple realities, conspiracy theories, elections, different ways to participate, spiritual bypassing, a lot of othering, this is the better way, then that's not the right way. And so how do we navigate as humans that are dancing in this fullness of our being, and that are committed to our soul and to our spiritual unfolding? How do we show up in this world at this time? in that way of the co-creating of the new.
In the way of humanity, which is what I feel is being called forth more than ever, is the deepening of our shared humanity, no matter how intense and polarized and divisive and adverse and confrontational, no matter how intense it gets. One of the key remembrances for me is to not dehumanize the other. Sometimes this is really tough work, especially if we have a 180 point of view. But dehumanizing really is not going to get us very far. So I think that the qualities that are being really called for are transparency, vulnerability, real vulnerability and transparency at this time, commitment, maybe more commitment than we've ever known was even possible within us, dedication, cultivating a shared language, I think is key at this time, so that through the cultivation of a shared language that we can do the work that's necessary to make the changes that are possible right now. And also to really get it, like to get that we have to work together and collectively, because as long as we try to say, okay, well, maybe I'll vote and then that leader will get elected and then they're going to solve all the problems. And then we abdicate self-responsibility again and go back into non-participating kind of lifestyle. That's no more the way. This is all about participation now. Like, what is our responsibility to participate together and to say that we have to not just show up to vote, but then we have to be part of everything that comes after the vote, that we are being called to real activation and collective care and mutual responsibility more than ever before. It's going to be easy to fight for the vote in whichever countries we're in, and then slip away into the jaws of oblivion again and just want someone else to take care of it. We're past that. It's not ever like that. We are being asked to co-participate, be vulnerable, be transparent, be willing to apologize. This is a time to practice also non-defensive listening too. And then the moment that our defenses like rise up and we want that will shut everything down. It shuts down the whole conversation. So that's a really big practice, active listening and non-defensive listening, and listening in a way where we're not jumping ahead of ourselves. What am I going to say? What am I going to defend? What am I going to prove? What am I going to rationalize? Like, to really sit in this grounded, open, vulnerable, transparent, non-defensive, committed, dedicated, courageous, more courageous than ever before, and keep our hearts open in the midst of everything that arises. That's what I feel is being called for.
Yes. And it starts with remembering that we are capable of all of that.
We are capable. It is the miracle of who we are, the multi-dimensional miracle and gift of who we are, is to hold all of this and embrace, rise, and transform.
I mean, as you were speaking about, it's not like you just vote and then you like forget about it. It reminds me of the origins of this journey of The Future is Beautiful, which started in 2010, so 10 years ago. And I had been working in politics in different ways. And it was an election year in the UK. And I had my first experience of not being excited about an election, because I used to love elections when I was a kid, and then I was working on them. And, I really felt like the possibility of, like what could happen through the power of an election and of what a changing government could bring. And of course, as I understood that it's more complex than that, and had to release the false identity of some of my idealism, I also felt that call for us to really recognize that we are creating the future through how we spend our time, our money, and our energy. This whole thing of the future is beautiful began in an election year where I got a friend to build this beautiful ballot box, the bottom part of which is my altar. It was called Think, Act, Vote. And so the vote part I kept as my altar. And I asked people to vote with their vision of the future that they choose. And really, it was an opportunity to talk to people about how we can't just put an X on a piece of paper and say, like, I've participated, and now they're going to create the future that I choose. Like, we all have to know what is that vision. And we have to, we are all carrying that vision. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had this language, but it's there, it's encoded in our soul, in our cells. And it's like, we have to give ourselves permission to bring that into form and to support each other as we each are bringing those pieces that we're all holding into that collective weaving. And yeah, that was the origins of what is the future is beautiful now.
Wow. I love it. Yes. That's the thing. Yeah. Stay open, stay humble, stay dedicated, stay engaged. Because it's really, and that is the call of yoga as well, is that engagement, that skill in action. Krishna to Arjuna, stay engaged. Yoga is skill in action. Here it is. And we're going to get tested on so many levels, and each one of those is an initiation inwardly and for all of us in the world and collectively.
And releasing the stories that it's too much or it's I can't or any of that, and finding ways to receive support where we need it in order to open up to more of that fullness of our own being.
Definitely. You said earlier that maybe a song would arise, and I think a song has arrived.
Please.
Okay. I have this image of a lot of times to raise the flame, but a rising flame inside of us, that it's the power of really honoring the roots of the earth, the roots of our being, the roots of our ancestors, the roots of our interconnectedness down under the earth and in the soils. And then from that deep honoring, this living flame rises within us. And for me, it's the flame of love in action here on this earth to serve. And so you were speaking about the origins of this podcast and of the work that you're doing. And I started to see the flame, the living flame, when I wasn't thinking about it, but I just started, as you were speaking, I could see that inner living flame of your spirit, just like, rising. And then this song was taught to me by a really amazing woman named Suzanne Sterling. And I think it was taught to her by her teacher, great, extraordinary activist, Starhawk, who is a legend. And so I went to sing that song and in honor of this living flame that is within each of us, in the deep well of wisdom that we all really hold within us, that embodied deep well of wisdom that is possible within every human being, and the living flame that rises. We will never, never lose our way to the well of her memory and the power of the living flame. It will rise again We will never, never lose our way to the well of her memory and the power of her living flame. It will rise again. So in honor of this living flame in the deep well of wisdom, and in honor of all the ways that every single one of us is breaking our hearts open, cracking our hearts open at this time, in honor of all the ways that each of us is getting tested and initiated and confronted and challenged and broken open millions and millions of times more so, in honor of this great alchemical soul journey. Just want to say thank you to Amisha and to all your team that brings this production into being, to your family, to your ancestors, to your teachers, to your students, to your communities, and to all the people who are listening at any given time. Great blessings for you, for your life, for all your lineages, for all your communities, for all that you're holding, for all that you're birthing, for all that you're bringing through. In the honor of each and every one of us, offer my deepest blessings and gratitude. Thank you so much for inviting me in, Amisha. Deepest respect to you. Blessed be.
And I would like to just add that I have personally experienced Rasa Yoga, and I'm really also feeling very honored to get to contribute something around sacred activism to that program later this year, and that I really highly recommend the 300 hour for those that have already taken the yoga journey, and that actually now there's a 200 hour that's going to be beginning soon online, and that you now have a flavor of Sianna's multi-dimensionality. So if you are going to learn online, then I highly recommend that you learn with Sianna and Greta, because they have a capacity to move beyond and through the screens.
Thank you, Amisha. And we're really hosting the 200-hour online with our teachers as well, the experts. And so Sridevi Bringi is going to be our teacher of philosophy. She's extraordinary. I mean, beyond. And she is really one of my greatest mentors. And Sheila Bringi, who is her daughter, is our teacher of mantra and Sanskrit pronunciation. And then we have Michelle Cassandra Johnson, who is our teacher and guide, and she's going to be really guiding everyone through this intersectionality of yoga and social justice and how we can show up in this way. And then my beloved Masood will be leading us through voice and through kirtan. And then we have our great anatomy and functional anatomy, living anatomy teachers, Dr. Jeremy Brooks and Gary Davis. So it's a collaboration of us all in service. And so thank you for that.
Excellent. And where do you want people to go to find out more about all of these offerings?
You can come to siannasherman.com and also rasayoga.com. And then you can find me on Instagram at Sianna Sherman. And you can DM me and reach out that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amisha. Really great honor. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mentioned in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow.
Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?